This video is not one of my normal channel videos. I'm just posting a recording that's of historical importance because it needs to go on the record. So if you're looking for your usual dose of Potholer 54, ignore this video, unless you're very keen on learning about Japan's World War II atomic bomb program. What I'm posting is a previously unpublished recording of a 1995 press conference by Japan's last remaining atomic bomb scientist, then 83-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Tatsusaburo Suzuki. Until he spoke at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan that day, no one from Japan's atomic bomb research team had spoken in detail about their wartime work. After the news conference, there were lots of reports about his revelations, including my own article for New Scientist magazine, but until now, the recording of that press conference hasn't been made public. So, when I was back in Tokyo a few years ago, I got the tapes from the FCCJ library and made digital copies. If the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan goes the way of the sadly demised Hong Kong Foreign Correspondents Club, my YouTube channel may end up being the only place where future generations of researchers can hear it. If you're interested, but don't want to sit through the whole thing, here's some background and a summary. Both Japan's Army and Navy were working on atomic bomb projects during the Second World War, which they kept top secret from each other. The Navy wanted to keep its research secret from the Army, and the Army wanted to guard its nuclear secrets from the Navy. If that makes no sense to you, then you haven't lived in Japan, a country where the ruling party used to finance the opposition party, and curry in a can is considered a perfectly normal drink. Tatsusaburo Suzuki, then a young major and a physicist, was asked to write a report about the feasibility of an atomic bomb. He wrote that it was not only feasible, but recommended Japan should start a development program to make one, because the Americans were probably already doing that. Based on his report, in 1940 a team of top scientists was gathered at a research center in Tokyo called the Rikagaku Kenkyusho, or Riken for short. Suzuki was the Army liaison. Many of the researchers had worked in Europe and the United States with the best physicists of the age, people like Niels Bohr, Enrico Fermi, and Ernest Lawrence. So Japan had the brains to make the atomic bomb, and it had the uranium from mines in Korea and China. The hard part was to separate the fissile uranium isotope, U-235, from the more common U-238, a process called enrichment. At the press conference, Suzuki revealed that the research team figured out what the Americans had figured out, that the best way to do this was to make uranium hexafluoride gas and then pass it through 5 large separators in a process called thermal diffusion. Suzuki told us they'd made a start, but they weren't successful in enriching the uranium to a satisfactory degree. What does that mean? Well, a good question, and there were certainly a few hands raised among the science correspondents at that press conference wanting to know the answer. Unfortunately, the microphone was then handed to some dumb tabloid reporter who said, "You keep talking about U-235 and neutrons and enrichment, but what does that mean? What's a neutron?" I looked at the correspondent from Nature who was sitting opposite me, and we both let out a groan. That question isn't on the recording because the tape was being switched over at the time, but his words are forever seared into my brain because we'd lost the only chance we'd ever have to find out what really happened. For those who want to sit through the whole thing, you'll notice the difference between the tone of questions on the first side of the tape and on the second. The research program was eventually stopped by an American bomb that set fire to the facility in April 1945. Japan didn't have the resources to rebuild. There's not much on the tape that wasn't reported at the time, so, as I said, I'm posting it purely to have it on the record. If you're not deeply into Japan's atomic bomb history, you won't miss much by skipping it. There's nothing else in this video except at the end, where I'll tell you another interesting story that I followed up concerning Japan's wartime atomic bomb research. If you've got this far, well, I'm already impressed.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I'm Neil Martin, and for want of a full-time paying job, I'm the club's first vice president. Nice to see so many working press here. We usually have more associates attending than working press, but today seems to be a little bit different, which I suspect is because of the interest in the subject matter. As you know, we've been having our 50th anniversary series speakers program, and we've had a lot of interesting people. But I think our guest today ranks one of the more interesting ones because he's talking about something that isn't generally or widely known, either in Japan and I think outside of Japan as well. And he also has not written or spoken much about this in recent years, and so he'll be drawing on his memory, which is also sort of a historic event. We do make tapes of these sessions, so we can always have it on file permanently for future reference. But before I introduce our guest speaker, I'd like to introduce the other members on the dais here. If you come to these luncheons very often, you know that there's something different today. We've kind of got a rogues gallery of you people up here instead of just board members like we normally do. It's an effort to kind of open up the process to involve you as well as us because, frankly, I don't have time to do all these lunches, and neither do most of the members on the board, so we'd like to try to get you involved. So cooperate, fill out that form, and sign up. On my far left, we have Eugene Mosa, who is with Reuters. Next to him is our former club president and also our sort of in-house interpreter when we can't afford or find a Nisuaka-san, and that's, of course, is Naoaki Yusui, who is with Defense News. And, of course, our guest, Dr. Suzuki. And myself, I'm with Barron's Financial Weekly. And on my right is Glenn Davis. He's the bureau chief of UPI. And on his right, did I say my left? But anyway, on his right is Pierre Taillefer. How was that? My French is great. I do food and names, okay. And next to him, of course, is Jocelyn Ford of Public Radio International. So that's who we have on the board today, on the dais, rather. And I'd like to introduce our speaker. Basically, I have a brief biography that I'm using to introduce him that will be available to you if you need a copy of it, if you don't want to have to take notes, save some time there. But Dr. Suzuki was born in Nagoya in 1911. He's now 83. He entered the military academy in 1929, graduated in 1933, and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. As his scientific aptitude was so excellent that the Army, believe it or not, banned him from serving in any combat unit. They wanted to keep that brain alive. Instead, he was assigned to the Army Artillery and Engineering College as a uniformed scientist. The Army wanted to tap more from his brain than just physics. They sent him to the School of Physics of Tokyo University in 1937 when he was a young lieutenant. He completed the postgraduate work in 1940 as captain with a PhD in physics. He was then assigned to the Army Aeronautical Technology Research Laboratory, and it was here where he started his preliminary research of atomic weapons, shifting through overseas theses and conducting physical calculations. As Japan accelerated its research of nuclear physics in 1944, he was sent as a liaison officer to the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, which I believe, where was it? This was Japan, wasn't it? And this research, in Japan. And it was sponsored by the imperial household. There he was a leader of Japan's drive to develop nuclear weapons, designing, among other things, a facility to separate fissionable uranium-235 from non-fissionable, and therefore useless, at least part of the time, uranium-238. The most famous physicist in this effort was Dr. Yoshio Nishina. During the closing days of the World War II, Lieutenant Colonel Suzuki was ordered to destroy all records of the project, which he did. So consequently, he has no written records left, and he will speak mostly, as I mentioned earlier, from memory. Just to bring you up to date, after the war, he became an educator, and he's basically now retired, although he served for a while as dean of Iwaki Meisei University in Ibaraki Prefecture. He lives near Shibuya, he told me. So I very much look forward to hearing what he has to say. I'd like to introduce Dr. Suzuki.
本日は外国記者の皆様方にお会いしてお話ができることを大変嬉しく思います。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much pleased today to have an opportunity to speak with you, the foreign press.
最初に原子力の軍事利用と平和利用について簡単にお話をしてから懇談していただきたいと思います。
What I would like to do today is first, let me talk about the military usage and peaceful usage of nuclear energy, and then I would like to go into a very informal discussion with you about that subject.
ご承知のように1938年の暮れにドイツのハーンとシュトラスマン等によって、核分裂が発見され、核分裂連鎖反応の可能性が検討されました。
Probably you may know, but at the end of 1938, Dr. Hahn and Stresemann, both of Germany, discovered the nuclear fission process, and they have started studying the possibilities of nuclear chain reaction.
また最初は核エネルギーを核兵器や軍事用核動力として利用することが考えられました。
Obviously, the first idea was to utilize this power or energy, nuclear energy, for the purposes of nuclear weapons and also for military power.
NTP で核保有国とされているのはアメリカ、ロシア、イギリス、フランス、中国の5カ国であります。
And as you know, again, under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, there are 5 admitted nuclear weapons countries: the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, and China.
現在、世界にはおそらく数万個の核弾頭があり、その大部分はアメリカとイギリスが持っていると思われます。
We estimate that there are several tens of thousands of nuclear warheads all over the world now, mostly owned by the United States and Russia.
アメリカとロシアは2万個から3万個の核弾頭を持ち、それぞれ約1万個ぐらいが実用になり、その他は旧式のもので廃止されると思われます。
Also, we estimate that the United States and Russia do have 20,000 to 30,000 nuclear warheads, respectively, out of which 10,000 are in service and the rest obsolete and expected to be put out of service in near future.
その他、フランスは約500個、中国は約400個、イギリスは約200個の核弾頭を持っていると思われます。
In addition, it is estimated that France owns about 500 nuclear warheads, China about 400, and the United Kingdom about 200.
核保有国以外の核開発については各国とも秘密にして分かりませんが、情報によりますとイスラエルは約100発、イスラエルは100発以上、インドは約20発、南アフリカ共和国は保有していたが全部廃棄したと言われております。
Now, talking about the situation in other countries other than nuclear weapons country, which obviously have been kept in tight secret, we understand that Israel has more than 100 nuclear warheads and India more than 20. In addition to this, the Republic of South Africa used to own nuclear warheads, but it voluntarily abandoned all of them.
1992年11月の S 放送によりますと、パキスタンは広島型原爆少なくも7発を持ち、航空機で攻撃できると言われております。
If I may add, quoting the NBS broadcast on November the 2nd, 1992, Pakistan is believed to own at least 7 atomic bombs of the size of Hiroshima type, and it does have airborne delivery capability.
1961年の10月末にソ連は広島型原爆の3000倍から5000倍エネルギーにすると50メガトンから60メガトンの核兵器を爆発させ、その放射性物質は偏西風によって北半球を飛び回りました。
As we understand it, at the end of October 1961, the then Soviet Union test detonated a nuclear bomb with a destruction capability of 50 megatons to 60 megatons, which means 3,000 times or 5,000 times more destructive than the bomb exploded over Hiroshima, and its official materials drifted on the trade wind all over the world.
同年11月10日、日本の航空自衛隊実験航空隊の F86F 戦闘機がこの放射性物質を取ってまいりましたので、12月1日、私がガンマ線スペクトルを使ってこの解析をいたしました。
So, on November the 10th of the same year, the Japanese Air Force sent up from its air-proving wing one of the F-86F fighter aircraft to collect these radioactive materials. And on December the 1st, I did have a chance to have this collected material analyzed by gamma ray spectrometer. And I did discover that there were a massive uranium-238 having conducted nuclear fission.
どうもありがとう。次に人口と消費エネルギーについて少し申し上げたいと思います。19世紀の初めには世界で人口が約10億人、現在は約57億人おりますが、2010年には約70億人に達すものと考えられます。
Now, let me change the subject to the population of the world and energy they are going to consume. At the beginning of the 19th century, it was said that there were 1 billion human beings living on the surface of the earth. And now there are 5.7 billion, and it is expected to snowball to 7 billion by the year 2010.
2010年のエネルギー消費量は現在に比べて先進国では約 1.5 倍、開発途上国では 2.5 倍に達するものと推定されますので、その対策を考えておく必要があります。
Consequently, the amount of energy human beings are going to consume in the year 2010 is going to be 150% of what it is consuming in advanced industrial countries today, and 250% of what it is consumed in developing countries. And obviously we have to think about what to do about this.
次にエネルギー資源と環境問題についてお話しいたします。現在考えられているエネルギー資源の埋蔵量は石油、天然ガス、ウランとも数十年に過ぎません。また石炭は約200年と言われております。
And when we consider the issue relations between energy resources and environment. It is very much important to note that the amount of recoverable energy resources are such as petroleum that can last for several decades, natural gas several decades, and uranium several decades. And as far as coal is concerned, it is believed that it can last for about 200 years.
現在世界の総発電量の約 20% は原子力によるもので、原子力を排出することは非常に困難であります。
Meanwhile, about 20% of the total electric power generation of the world comes from nuclear energy, and therefore it is very difficult for the world to abolish totally the atomic energy.
またエネルギー消費による環境問題、すなわち、二酸化炭素の増加や地球温暖化を防ぐためには原子力による方が化石燃料によるものよりもずっと有利であります。
And obviously, if we are discussing the environmental problem that can be caused by the energy consumption, particularly I'm talking about the increase on carbon dioxide and greenhouse effect on the earth, and then I have to say that it is much more beneficial for mankind to use nuclear energy.
したがって使用済み核廃棄物を上手に閉じ込めて、人間から隔離し放射線障害を防止して原子力を有効に利用することが必要であると思います。
And therefore, what I think at this moment is what we have to do is to contain spent nuclear wastes skillfully and detaching it from mankind, and at the same time to take full advantage of nuclear energy. And that, I think, is the option for mankind. This is my very brief opening remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki. If we can get the podium removed. There. Thank you. As is the custom, we'll begin with working press first, and if there's time, anybody else would like to ask a question, we'll accommodate you. We have to stop abruptly and promptly at 2 o'clock, so there won't be any chance to extend it beyond that. So, working press, anybody have an initial start-off question? Hey, please.
My name is Peter McGill, and I'm a freelance. In the introduction, when you were being introduced, it said that you were posted as a liaison officer to chemical and physical laboratory. And it said that this was set up by the imperial family. Can you explain? Can you tell us about the connection between the imperial family and the Japan's A-bomb project during the war, which you omitted to mention during your speech? You didn't tell us anything about what you were doing during the war, which is why we came here. Can you tell us? It seems fairly clear that the late Emperor Showa was kept informed of this project. Can you tell us what authorizations he gave for the project? What information he received about this project? What documents he signed about this project? And can you tell us also about other members of the imperial family what they knew about it, whether they supported it. And for example, I was told by the late Prince Takeda that he fully supported Japan having its own atom bomb. So could you tell us about the imperial family and the atom bomb? Thank you.
皇室というのは、昭和天皇の弟の三笠宮というのと高松宮であります。でこの2人はもう非常に日本の戦争の戦況が悪くなりまして、そうして、普通の戦争をやってちゃとても戦争を続けられないと。で核兵器をやりたいということで、高松宮と三笠宮の2人が理化学研究所の飯森研究室へ行ってウランを取るのにどうしたらいいかということを聞かれた程度で皇室が関係されたのはウラン鉱石の採取の関係だけであります。まずそれだけ。
First, the involvement of the imperial household into this project was rather limited. That is what I would like to stress. Actually, younger brothers of the late Showa emperors, Prince Mikasa and Prince Takamatsu, were much worried about the deteriorating combat situation during World War II, and they decided that if we continue in the form of conventional warfare, Japan may not keep it out, and therefore they thought we may have to go to nuclear. And so Princes Takamatsu and Mikasa came to the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research, and namely Imori Laboratory, and they asked how Japan can tap uranium. But as I have said, this is the maximum degree that the imperial household was involved in this particular project.
次に、日本の核兵器研究については昭和天皇には許可を得ておりませんし、サインももらっておりません。報告もしておりません。ただ原子爆弾が落ちてからはどういうものだかというような説明はしたと思います。
Now, let me proceed to explain about the Japanese nuclear research and the Showa emperor. We have never asked any permission. We have never had any signature. And we have never made any report about our nuclear development program to the late emperor. Having said that, let me say that after the atom bomb fell on Hiroshima, we were requested to give some explanations and briefings to the emperor.
Please.
Edwin Carmiel, freelance. Had Japan had the opportunity to develop the A-bomb in time, what would have been the target?
Right. 実際日本がやった核兵器の研究は非常に初歩の段階で戦争が終わりました。したがって、完成する間際に至っておりませんから、あまり その完成したらどうするということは考えておりませんでしたが、アメリカからB29が日本を爆撃しておりますので、その爆撃の基地をサイパンとかテニアンとかそういう基地を攻撃すればいいんじゃないかと、そういうふうなことは言われておりましたが、何せ非常にまだ先のことでございますから、あまり実際にどこに使うというようなことは議論されませんでしたが、今のようなそのアメリカの日本が空襲を受ける航空基地をに運んだら攻撃したらいいんじゃないかと、こういうふうに考えてたようであります。
Actually, the Japanese research of nuclear weapons was in such a preliminary and primitive stage, so it was not a practical idea to discuss how to use that bomb if it ever is completed. However, what we have vaguely in our mind was that since at that time Japan was bombed by a lot of B-29 bombers, which were dispatched from islands of Saipan or Tinian, and therefore obviously the logical conclusion was to use the Japanese nuclear weapons to bomb these bases. However, as I have said, our preparation was so primitive and in such a preliminary stage, so nobody or few people discussed about that possibility seriously. However, as I have said, the logical conclusion was that we used the bomb to bomb air bases where B-29s were dispatched from.
もちろんアメリカの艦隊に対して使いたいということはありますけれども、制海権を取られておりますので、実際それができてもそういう艦隊に対してやるということは非常に難しかったんじゃないかと今考えております。
And obviously we wanted to use that powerful weapons against the American fleets in the Pacific. But we knew that air superiority and sea control were both in hands of the U.S. Navy, and I do know that it must have been very, very difficult to use that bomb for that purpose.
Dr. Suzuki, I think I'd like to ask a question that's on all our minds, is how close was Japan to actually developing and having a bomb that it could use? How close were they?
どれくらい爆弾開発、成功裏の開発に近づいていたとお考えでしょうか。
アメリカは、確か20億ドルと12万5千人の人を動員してやっておりました。それに対して日本は1000万円と50人ぐらいの人間でやっております。だからアメリカの成功に対して私が考えておりますのには、その予算あるいは人員の比率ぐらいの割合でしかできてなかった、こういうふうに思います。
Let me reply to your question this way. As I remember, the United States was pumping in $2 billion and 125,000 manpower into the project to develop nuclear weapons. On the other hand, Japan was investing 10 million yen and about 50 people into this project. And therefore, the chance of Japan's success was in proportion with this difference in investment, let me say that.
I will point out that 10 million yen, and apparently in parity at those times, was equivalent to $1. It'd be about $10 million, I'm told, and that would be, I guess, considerable size of money even back at that time. Well, whoever.
その頃は4円が1ドルぐらいだと思う。
At that time, by the way, the exchange rate was about 4 yen per dollar.
Dr. Suzuki, Thomas Caldwell, UPI Radio. Robert Wilcox, in his book Japan's Secret War, discussed a nuclear weapons research facility he believed was located in what is now the North Korean city of Hungnam, back then known as Konan. Was there such a facility, and if so, did you have any knowledge of it?
もしご存知だったらどんな施設だったか教えてください。
ロバート・ K ・ウィルコックスの「ジャパンズ・シークレット・ウォー」という本には今お話になったようなことが書いてございます。で、朝鮮ノースコリアですね、北朝鮮からはウラン鉱石を取ることはやっておりましたけれども、朝鮮に、日本の核兵器開発その他の施設を持っていったということはありませんし、私はないと確信しております。
Well, you're talking about a book titled Japan's Secret War, written by R.K. Wilcox. Well, I can say that Japan was trying to explore and collect uranium from what is today's North Korea. However, I can say that we, as far as I understand, we did not have any nuclear facility in what is today's North Korea. And I believe there was none of that kind in that area we have just been discussing about.
Please.
Peter Hadfield, New Scientist magazine. You said that your research was in a preliminary stage and didn't compare with the Americans in terms of money. I'd like to ask some specific questions about just how far you did get. Firstly, is it true that you managed to separate out U-235? Secondly, did the Navy in its project develop any centrifuges, which were a crucial part of the separation process? Thirdly, had the theoretical side of making the bomb been worked out? In other words, you had the theoretical knowledge to do it. And fourthly, did you have sufficient uranium which, when separated, could have yielded enough material to make an atomic bomb? So if you could specifically please tell us just how close you got.
お答えいたします。核兵器の研究ではまず材料がいります。それは6フッ化ウランユーレニアムヘキサフロライドですね、6フッ化ウランを作ることでございます。でその6フッ化ウランを作ることには成功しております。4キロから5キログラムぐらいを作っております。それから前後があれになりますが理論でございますが、これはいろいろな書き物に書いて出してあります。と申しますのは、もしウラン235が1キログラム核分裂をすると TNT1万8000トンぐらいのエネルギーが出るという、そういう計算なんかは終わっておりました。しかしウラン235を分離するということには 成功しておりません。これは2つの方法を日本ではやりました。一つはサーマルディフュージョン、熱拡散の方法、それからもう一つは遠心分離の方法、セントリフューガルフォースを使った方法で、熱拡散の方法につきましては予備実験は成功しています。予備実験というのは例えば窒素とかあるいは二酸化炭素の同位元素を分離すると、そういうことには成功しておりますが、ウランの分離には成功しておりません。それから海軍がやっていた遠心分離法につきましてはまだ設計図ができた程度で実際にものを作るところにまでは行っておりません。以上です。
Okay, thank you for your good question, and let me reply to your question. First, you have to understand that you need some kind of nuclear fissionable materials if you want to develop nuclear weapons. And one of the most vital components of materials in that effort is what is called uranium hexafluoride, UF6. We were successful in separating uranium hexafluoride. Actually, we have obtained 4 to 5 kilograms of that material. And now, talking about the nuclear fission theory, we do have, of course, a lot of documents and theses that endorses that, but what we calculated at that time was that if we could obtain 1 kilogram of 235 uranium, or uranium-235, which is fissionable, and then that will be equivalent to about 18,000 tons of high explosives called TNT. That was our calculation. However, let me quickly add that we were not successful in separating uranium-235 to a satisfactory degree. We were not successful. To paraphrase, there were 2 methods to do that separation. One was called thermal diffusion, and the other centrifugal separation. And what we were doing was that we were successful in preparatory or preliminary experiments. By that, I mean we were successful in separating nitrogen or carbon dioxide, but we were not successful in separating uranium. Now you were talking about the Navy's effort, which obviously you referred to as centrifugal separation effort, but all that the Navy has got to was to prepare a kind of blueprint or design.
もう一つ理論的な方面におきまして、ウラン235あるいはプルトニウム239をどれくらい集めたら原子爆弾が1個できるか、クリティカルマスの問題で、これを研究するためには一つの核分裂ウラン235あるいはプルトニウム239が1回核分裂をすると、その時に中性子がいくつ出てくるか、ニュートロンですね、中性子がいくつ出てくるかというこの計算でございます。その計算につきましては実験と計算を両方やるわけでございますが、京都大学でですねフィッションといいますが、一つのフィッションで平均して 2.6 個の中性子が出てくるという、こういう計算をしております。
And another topic I think I have to refer to is about the theory of nuclear fission. And by saying that, I am referring to uranium-235 and plutonium-239. The point is how much mass of uranium-235 or plutonium-239 we need to achieve what is called the critical mass, a volume enough to trigger chain reaction. And we were doing this study, and we actually, it boils down to calculation how many neutrons we are going to get by one nuclear fission reaction. And we did make calculation of that, and this theorization needs a lot of experiments as well as calculations, both of them. And we got a result calculated by Kyoto University, and we decided that the number was 2.6 per nuclear fission, 2.6 neutrons per nuclear fission.
この 2.6 という値は現在、知られております平均 2.47 プラスマイナス 0.03% という値に非常に近い値で大変立派な研究成果と思います。なおこういう計算をして実際に広島長崎に落とされたウランやプルトニウムの量は多分100ポンド45キログラムだと思われます。
And this figure, 2.6 neutrons per nuclear fission, is very close to what is established today, which is 2.4 neutrons per nuclear reaction, and that is within plus minus 0.03% of this particular standard figure. And I believe that it was a great academic achievement on the part of Kyoto University to have come up with this figure. Now, based on that figure, I estimate that bombs or the volume of nuclear fissionable materials contained in atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were approximately about 100 pounds.
Next question, please. Please, sure.
Hi, just to clarify, I don't honestly know very much about the difference of uranium-235 and uranium-FX or anything. So the point is that you had the theoretical, Dr. Suzuki, the theoretical understanding of what needed to be done. It was just, the issue was actually doing it.
この理論の方から考えますと原子番号ということがあります。で原子番号ということはどういうことかというと原子核の中に陽子がいくつあるプロトンがいくつあるかというのは原子番号だから例えば水素が原子番号1だとヘリウムが原子番号2だとか金は原子番号79とかこういうことそれでこの核兵器として使うためには原子番号が偶数ですねイーブンナンバーそれからマスナンバーっていうのは原子核の中に陽子と中性子両方ありますがそれを両方合わせた数これをマスナンバーと言っています。ガスナンバーがオッドナンバーですね奇数であるこういうものを使わなければならない。したがって、ウランというのは原子番号が92でありますウランは。だからイーブンナンバーですね。それから238というのはイーブンナンバーだから核爆発は死ねません。235というのがオッドナンバーだから核爆発でウランの233というのも核分裂をいたします。だからプルトニウムの、専門的になって大変恐縮でございますが、プルトニウムというのは原子番号が94です。これは世の中にありません。人間が作ってやらなきゃありませんがそしてその 質量数が239のものでないと爆発しない。それで原子炉の中でこう持ってきますとですね、例えばプルトニウムだとプルトニウム40というインピュリティがですね非常にたくさん入っているんですね。だからそのままでは原子爆弾にならない。そういうことがそれをいろいろアメリカがおやりになったような方法なんかでだんだんウラン235の分量を多くしてきましてですね、92% とか 95% ぐらいウラン235で、普通ニュークリアリアクター普通原子炉で原子力発電をしておりますが、そういうものはウラン235が 2% から 4% ぐらいしかないんです。でそんなものは核爆発しませんね。だから90なの。それから北線がノースコリアやるかどうか知りませんけど、そういう核開発国がやるものでもやはり、プルトニウム239というのが 96% 以上でないと核ニュークリアウェポンとして使えない、ね、原子炉の中では使えますけどね、核爆発には使えない。そういうことで、それは非常な大変な仕事ですね。
Let me explain some of the theory of nuclear physics. First of all, you have to understand the definition called nuclear number, which defines how many protons one nuclear core involves. For example, in the case of hydrogen, the number is 1. In the case of helium, the number is 2. Now, if you want to use some element as material for a nuclear weapon, there are two requirements: that the element's nuclear number must be an even number, and in addition to that, the mass number of that element, which means how many nucleus plus neutrons that particular element contains, must be an odd number. These two are mandatory requirements. Now, thinking about uranium, its nuclear number is 92, which is even. Having said that, uranium-238 has an even number of mass, which means it is not fissionable. If you come down to uranium-235, whose number is odd, then it is fissionable. And there's another isotope of uranium, uranium-233, which is also fissionable. In case of plutonium, its nuclear number is 94, and its mass number is 239, and that qualifies. But plutonium does not exist in the nature, and therefore we have to make it artificially.
今申しましたのは普通のオーディナリーな原子爆弾でありまして、スーパーニュークリアウェポンで1954年の3月1日にビキニで、アメリカが核爆発させました広島型のものの1000倍のものですね。それから先私がお話ししました1961年の10月30日にあったソ連のもの、そういうものでは核融合フュージョンですね、フィッションでなくてフュージョンをやる、リチウムとかあるいはトリチウムとかそういうような元素をたくさん入れておきまして、中性子を非常にフュージョンによって中性子を非常にたくさん出します。そういうことをやればウラン238の一部分も核分裂をして、そして現在ですね非常に多くの核兵器が広島型のものの1000倍ぐらいの力を持ってるんですね。いわゆる水素爆弾というやつですが、ハイドロジェンボンベですが、そういうものは ウラン238の核分裂も利用していると。で、広島型とかそういう新しい核開発国が作るような初歩的な核兵器というのは今申しましたように、原子番号が偶数で、マスナンバー質量数が奇数のものですが、スーパーニュークリアウェポンの方はその外側にウラン235を置いておいて、そして爆発の威力を数百倍とか数千倍にすると、そういうことが行われているようでございます。
Now, I have talked about what I call ordinary nuclear weapons. But there are something else, and that is what is called super nuclear weapons, such as these bombs the United States detonated in 1954 over Bikini, which was 1,000 times more powerful than what was detonated over Hiroshima, or another bomb detonated by the Soviet Union on October the 30th of 1961. These bombs are called fusion bombs, and they add some other elements, lithium or tritium, into the bomb so that the bomb can produce a lot more neutrons. And by doing so, even uranium-238 can be led to start chain reaction. And so this is popularly called hydrogen bomb, but today's nuclear weapons are, per unit, 1,000 times more powerful than what was dropped on Hiroshima. And that is because it uses uranium-238 as one of the fissile materials. And so whenever a new and upstart nuclear weapons country come into the stage of the world politics, what they are talking about is the primary or beginner's nuclear weapons using an element with an even nuclear number and odd mass number. However, the situation today, as I understand, is that today's nuclear weapons are much more powerful and probably more than 100 to 1,000 times more powerful than what was dropped over Hiroshima.
All right. We're going to have Glenn Davis and then followed by...
Okay, so just to sum that up, then Dr. Suzuki would agree that the research at Keio and his own research, Japan did have the theoretical knowledge to construct the bomb. He
Hope
would
he can
agree with
answer
that.
yes or no.
Can これは日本の学者が2つに分かれまして、こういう爆弾は全然作れないと、あるいは100年も1000年もかかると、そういうふうに考えている学者もおりましたし、それからいやそうでもないと、早くできるという考えの人とあります。もしそのある数の装置で100年かかるならば、その100倍の設備を持ってくれば1年でできるんじゃないか、そういう考えの人もおります。ただ数だけではいけませんので、なかなかその難しいんですが、どうも日本の学者は最初は相当これできるんじゃないかと思いましたが、1945年頃になってから悲観的な、悲観的というのは、原子爆弾はとてもできそうにもない、あるいはこの戦争には間に合わない、あるいは10年や20年ではできないと、そういう考えの学者がやはり半分以上いたと思います。
Well, no yes or no explanation, because there were two schools of academics during that time. One school were pretty pessimistic. They believed Japan would not be able to develop nuclear weapons, or even if it could take 100 or 1,000 years. The second school thought that, no, you are wrong, we can develop that much, much sooner. And at that time, the prevailing idea of the second school was that if it would take 100 years to develop a nuclear weapons with existing facilities, and then what if we get 100 times more equipment, and then we may be able to develop that within 1 year. Having said that, I have to note that many of the Japanese scientists who initially believed that Japan could develop nuclear weapons in time made a turnabout by 1945. They became very pessimistic. They thought that it is very, very unlikely that Japan can develop nuclear weapons by the end of the war. And anyway, even if Japan could develop one, it would not be in time with war.
先ほど日本では50人ほどで研究、本当に専門に研究してきた人は50人ぐらいですが、その中で40人ぐらいはなかなか原子爆弾というのはできないということを1945年になってから言い出した。それからあとの10人ぐらいで、私を含めて10人ぐらいはいや、やればできるからしっかりやれというふうでございます。それでその時に電磁分離法というのがございまして、アメリカではカリフォルニア大学のバークレーのローゼンスラボラトリーで3000トンのマグネットを使ってウラン235を分離しておりました。その時に、ルーテナントジェネラルの安田武雄という人が、アメリカが3000トンのマグネットを使うんだったらでやるんだったら日本は5万トンのマグネットを作れ。で巡洋艦を5、6隻潰してそれで作れというふうに言っておりましてですね、なかなかその元気のあってしっかりやれという人と、それから悲観論というそういう二手に分かれて、それからもう一つ先ほどスーパーニュークリアウェポンのことを言いましたが、そこの中に3F、3F というのがあります。3F のニュークリアウェポンはどうなのか、まずフィッションを起こさせて、それで非常に高熱を得ると。そしてその外にあるリチウムとかあるいは三重水素をフュージョンを起こす。そうするとそのまた外にあるウラン238がフィッションを起こす。でフィッション、フュージョン、フィッションという3つのステージをと。でこういうのを汚い水爆というふうに言っております。で、その最後のフィッションのないフィッションとフュージョンだけでやる水爆の方はクリーンなその水爆だと、こういうふうに言っています。
Let me add that, I have told you that Japan was engaging only 50 exclusive researchers in this project. And as I understand, 40 out of these people, 50 specialists, were turning in 1945 to be rather pessimistic. They believed that it was impossible for Japan to develop nuclear weapons. The remainder, about 10 experts or specialists, and that includes me, believed that we could do it. We believed we had to work much harder to do that. And now, at that time, the University of California, Berkeley, was equipped with an electromagnetic separation facility whose capacity was 3,000 tons, and that was used for separation of uranium-235. And now there was a boss of mine whose name was Lieutenant General Takeo Yasuda, and he advocated that, and I quote, if the United States has a 3,000-ton facility, then why don't we build a 50,000-ton facility? And we can get it by scrapping 5 or 6 heavy cruisers. So he was such an advocate, and as I have said, there were people who were sort of go-getters and who were pessimists. And at this point, let me add quickly to what I have referred to as supernuclear weapons. There's a word 3F. And in these kind of weapons, first, fission, nuclear fission occurs, which produces very high temperature. That activates lithium and tritium, followed by fusion, and then by fission, FFF. And this kind of bomb is called so-called dirty H-bomb. On the other hand, there is a type of bomb that does not have the third stage, the second fission stage, and this kind of bomb is called clean H-bomb.
It's okay, because we have to...
ジェネラル安田がですね、その非常に大きなマグネットを作れと言ったことに対して、ドクター西名はその時は日本は210トンのマグネットしかなかったんです。これは210トンのマグネットをアメリカで作ってもらったマグネット。それで、そういう210トンからやっぱりステップバイステップでですね、その次は1000トンぐらい、その次は1万トンとやっていかないと、急に何万トンものマグネットを作ったらおそらく実験で失敗するだろうという西名博士のその勧告を受けて、その大きいマグネットは取りやめになりました。
And I have just talked about Lieutenant General Yasuda's advocation that Japan should have a 50,000-ton magnet. And then Dr. Nishina of RIKEN intervened. And by the way, let me say that at that time, the biggest magnet RIKEN or Japan had was a one with a capacity of 210 tons. And by the way, that was made in the United States. Dr. Nishina said that what we should do was to proceed step by step, not to jump from 210 tons to 50,000 tons, and he warned that otherwise we would fail during the experimental stage.
Glenn, do you want? I think this will probably be our final question. I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of unanswered questions that we'd all like to, but the good doctor does live here in Tokyo, so I'd suggest if you're interested in pursuing this, maybe you could do it. Do you have time to stay a little more long? I know Usui-san doesn't, so it's okay to continue? Okay. But we'll have to get a replacement for Mr. Usui because my nuclear Japanese is really insufficient. How about Eugene? Do you feel up to the task? Thank you. Okay. Then he will stay a little longer, so you will have chances. Please, Glenn.
I'm Glenn Davis from UPI. And I understand. I think people who studied this subject, it's pretty common knowledge that all of the major physicists who studied nuclear physics before the war, particularly in the 1930s, all went to the same basic college, and that was in Copenhagen, and they studied under a world-famous professor named Niels Bohr. And that professor disseminated the knowledge that was necessary for most nuclear programs, including the American program. That knowledge was brought to the United States by mostly Jewish scientists. And the German program was very far advanced, and there was a graphite reactor actually operating at the end of the war. Fortunately, the British bombed the place and ended that. However, I find it very disingenuous for Japan to argue now that they had no knowledge and that their program was in a very primitive stage. Actually, they had the same amount of knowledge that anybody else had around the end of the 1930s. So how can you argue that Japan's program was primitive? I don't understand this.
段階にしかなかったとおっしゃるのでしょうか。もっと進んでいたのではないでしょうか。
ニールス・ボアはですね、デンマークのコペンハーゲンにいてコペンハーゲン派の学者でございまして、西名義雄、それから湯川秀樹、友永真一郎、そういうのは全部コペンハーゲン派の学者でございます。で、ボア夫妻は1937年の春日本に参りました。そして、東京大学の法学部で、教室が大きいですから法学部で数日にわたって、量子論クワンタムセオリーの話をされました。その時に、通訳されたのが西名義雄教授でございます。でそれで、非常に、日光を見たりしてですね、案内したりして非常に人柄もいいし大変仲良くなって、私もその時、ボーアさんの話を全部聞きました。そこで今ありましたことでございます。この理論的には日本は割合に進んでおりましてですね、ノーベル物理学賞ノーベル物理学賞をもらったのは湯川秀樹、友永真一郎、江崎レオナという3人でございますが、理論江崎レオナっていうのはトンネルエフェクト、トンネルダイオードでもらっておりますが、その他の人は非常に理論がで、その頃日本では非常に理論の方は進んでおりましたが、先ほど申し上げましたサイクロトロンの210トンというサイクロトマグネットを持ったサイクロトロン、これはアメリカにはたくさんありましたがヨーロッパには一つもありません。日本に一つあっただけです。したがってその実験の方も、基礎的な実験は非常にやっております。ただ、これを何%やってるかということは問題になりますが、先ほど中性子が 2.6 出るということは非常に世界的な立派な研究成果でございまして、そういうデータは日本は大変進んでいると、おそらくアメリカよりも進んでたと思います。ただウラン235を実際に濃縮したという実証が得られないので、これをどう評価するかが問題でございますが、理論的には相当勉強してまた成果もあったけれども、実験の方は割合に成果がなかったんじゃないかというふうに思います。
You have just mentioned about Professor Niels Bohr, who is, in my opinion, the head of what is called the School of Copenhagen. And to this school belonged Dr. Yoshio Nishina, Dr. Hideki Yukawa, and Dr. Shinichiro Tomonaga. Actually, in the spring of 1937, Dr. and Mrs. Niels Bohr visited Japan, and he had a series of lectures at Tokyo University's Law Department, a Grand Hall, a series of lectures on quantum theory. And at that session, Dr. Nishina served as an interpreter as well as taking him to Nikko and other places. The Boers did have very nice personality, and they struck friendship. And actually, I myself listened every and single lecture of Dr. Bohr. Now, having said that, I would say that the Japanese theorization or theoretical physics was very, very advanced. And actually, I can point out that there were 3 Japanese scientists who won Nobel Physics Prize, Dr. Yukawa, Dr. Tomonaga, and Dr. Esaki, who won that by the theory of tunnel diode, but the other 2 won it simply on theory. And so I can say that as far as theoretical physics is concerned, Japan was very much advanced. And I have told you about the 210-ton magnet of Japanese cyclotron. Similar equipment were abounded in the United States at that time, and Japan, of course, did have one, but Europe had none. And Japan was conducting basic researches on that. For example, one of the results or achievements we have acquired from that was the 2.6 neutrons per nuclear fission reaction, which I think is a very worldly achievement, academic achievement. And in that sense, I think the theorization or data collecting in physics in Japan at that time was more advanced even than in the United States. Now, if you ask, then what kind of achievement have you got in enriching uranium-235, we don't have any demonstrable achievements. So what I would like to say is that in theory, we were much advanced, but if you want real results, we had few.
Do you have to go now, Mr. Son?
Yeah.
Okay. Peter?
Thank you.
3 questions very quickly. Can you tell us if you had any intelligence during the war at all about the Manhattan Project, and what intelligence you had about the Nazi German A-bomb project? Did the Nazi scientists share with you any information about what they were doing, or did you spy on them in Germany? Secondly, why has it taken you 50 years to talk about this? It says in the introduction that you haven't spoken about this for 50 years. If you were nowhere near developing a bomb, why destroy all the evidence of the war? Why has the government of Japan been trying to keep this secret for so long? Why is it not mentioned in Japanese textbooks? Why do young Japanese not know anything about this project, yet they know all about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Didn't you have a duty to tell the Japanese public? I mean, this is part of their history during the war. Why have you been concealing this for so long if you've got nothing to be ashamed about? And why is it a taboo? My last question is, what do you think about the necessity and the morality of the American bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
戦時中のことなんですけれども、マンハッタン計画についてはご存知だったと思います。2番はドイツの原子爆弾について、
Yamada-san, is he here?
ドイツの科学者の交流あるいはスパイとかですね、でドイツのあれを知ってたかですね。これ1つ目ですね。1つ目の質問ですね。2つ目がですね、イントロダクションで50年もこの話についてお話になってないということをちょっと間違ってると思うんですけどね。そういうふうに言ってるんですけどね、それでもしですね、本当だったらなんで50年黙ってらっしゃったのかと、それからなぜですね、そんなに研究成果がなかったんだろうね、戦争の最終段階でなぜ記録を全部抹殺してしまったのかと、でなぜ日本の政府はこれを認めようとしないのか、日本の学校の例えば教科書の中にこれを入れないのか、日本の若者はこれを全く知らないではないか、広島と長崎のことはよく知ってるけれども、日本の先生の研究実験に何も知らされていないではないかと、で先生にはそういう義務があるんじゃないだろうかと、で3番目にはですね、アメリカが広島と長崎に落とした必要性と、それからその道義的なことについてお伺いしています。
私の答えられる範囲内でお答えをいたし
I'll
ます。
try to answer within what I can.
私はマンハッタン計画は知りませんでした。
I didn't know anything about the Manhattan Project.
ただアメリカの雑誌ですね、例えばフィジカルレビューとかレビュー・オブ・モダン・フィジックスとそういうような学術雑誌から核分裂の論文が全然なくなったんです。それまでは1940年頃まではありましたが、いっぺんになくなったということで、マンハッタン計画は知らなかったけれども多分研究はしているだろう。ただしどういう規模で研究しているかということは全く分かりませんでした。
What I did know, however, since 1940, nuclear fission articles had completely disappeared from well-known research papers like Physical Review or Review of Modern Physics. So I surmised that the United States might be conducting research into the subject. But of course, I did not know of the Manhattan Project. I did not know the size or the amount of investment that went into the project.
次にドイツでございますが、ドイツの原爆の研究は知りませんでした。
I also did not know anything about Germany's atomic bomb program.
お互いに同盟国ではありましたけれども、最高秘密のことをですね、同盟国に話すと秘密が漏れるというのでお互いに秘密にしていたためと思います。
I think both of our countries, although we were allied, thought on the same line. They were both top secret programs in each country, and if we had shared this with the other, then the secret would be given out by the other partner. So that's probably why Germany did not know about Japan's project and vice versa.
ただドイツが、景気が良かった時はウランを2トン送ってくれというふうにこちらから頼んだら、向こうは何に使うんだ、使い道が分からなければ送れないという返事が来ました。
When Germany was winning the war, so in the first half of the war, Japan asked Germany to send 2 tons of uranium. But Germany replied, what are you going to use this for? And if you're not going to tell us what you're going to use this for, we can't send it to you. That was the extent of our ties.
ただソビエトにつきましては、ソビエトの科学雑誌の中に、ウランで発電をすると濃縮ウランを作るための電力の方が発電する電力よりも多くなるからダメだというような論文が出ておりました。
We did know, however, of one article in a Soviet physics magazine about uranium and power generation, how enriched uranium was not fitted for power generation. That much we knew.
ただこれは諜報といいますか、情報の偽の情報を送ってきたかもしれませんが、日本ではもし非常に電気とかエネルギーがいっても、エネルギーを原子爆弾のようにコンパクトに使えれば、たとえエネルギー的にバランスしなくてもですね、価値はあるんじゃないかと、こういうことは考えておりました。
We did not know, however, if this was real information or disinformation, and at that time Japan thought it highly valuable that power could possibly be generated by using uranium, and that the main problem was to come up with a compact size power generation. So that much we knew.
本日申し上げた話の中でも数量的には約どれくらいとか約とかいう話がありましたが、 記録をですねトップシークレットの関係で、記録をデータをコピーしたり計算結果をコピーしたりあるいはそれをコピーしたものを日記に書いたり家へ持ってきたりそういうことは禁じられておりましたので研究室に全部置いておきました。
As far as the today's, I've used the word estimate throughout this little speech I gave today. This is because all the documents that were all the records of our experiments were top secret, and we were not allowed to copy it or take it out or refer it to in our diaries even, and that's why I don't have the exact numbers with me.
そこでですね、今まで50年間黙っていたわけじゃないんですけど非常にアウトラインの、思い出しながらやるというようなことしか書けませんでしたが研究者の中の一人がですね、こっそりと日記を書いていたのがおります。これは竹内正という方ですが後で、横浜国立大学の教授になった方ですがその方の日記が非常に正しいものじゃないかと思っております。
I have not been silent about this subject for 50 years. I have spoken earlier about this subject, but it was always in the form of an outline because of what I told you earlier about the records. However, after the war, I found out that one of my colleagues, Professor Masa Takeuchi, who later became a member of the faculty of the Yokohama National University, well, he turned out that he kept a diary. And so what he has said, Dr. Takeuchi, is fairly accurate, I think.
昭和史の天皇というのがありましてですねその読売新聞社がそれから出しているので竹内日記からといって
Oh, his diary is, by the way, published by Yomiuri Shimbun.
最後に
最後ですね、アメリカの広島と長崎の実際に原爆を使ったことに対しての必要性があったのかあるいは道義的な問題としてどういうふうに思われるか。
実際はいろいろな日本を降伏させる方法がいろいろあったと思います。海軍は海上封鎖させておけば日本なんていうのは自滅してしまうんだという、海軍の統合参謀本部議長の人なんかはそういうふうに思っててあまり原爆というのに関心を持っていなかったというようなことも言われます。ただ私は広島と長崎を見ましてですねで今度アメリカで原爆投下50周年のいろいろな行事がありますけれどもどうも戦争というのは非常に今の戦争でも悲惨でございますが広島長崎のこともですね、アメリカの方は、パールハーバーで、闇討ちをしたからパールハーバーがあったから広島長崎あるのは当たり前だとそういうふうにおっしゃる方も退役軍人の中にはおいでになりますがやはり、それは軍の指導者とかあるいは政府の指導者が悪いのであって、実際、原子爆弾を落とされて死んだ女や子供を見ますとですね、なるべくならばその艦隊とかあるいは基地とか、軍事的なものに限って攻撃をしてその軍事的ななかなか難しいと思いますが軍事的に息の根を止めた方が良かったとそういうような考えもあるんじゃないかと思います。
On the question about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, whether it was necessary and the moral factors, I do think there were very many ways to force Japan to surrender. For example, the U.S. Navy firmly believed that a blockade was sufficient. Japan would starve to death, basically. But I have seen Hiroshima and Nagasaki right after the bomb,
and I am very much aware of the 50th anniversary events in the States about the two bombs. I have an overall impression that war is very cruel. I am also aware that many U.S. veterans have said that, well, Hiroshima and Nagasaki is an answer to Pearl Harbor and the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. Well, this is what the military and the government, the leaders, think maybe. But after seeing the victims in Hiroshima, like women and children, I do have an idea that I wish it were only used against military targets, such as military bases or fleets.
私は昨年ポツダム会議の会場を見てきました。そこでよく日本ではもっと早く降伏しておれば原爆は落ちなかったと言います。それから長崎で、B29 がばらまいたビラをたくさん見てきました。そこの中でやはり、早く降伏せよというふうに言っております。それで、最近になってから8月にもう2発落とすと、9月10月11月に3発ずつ落とすと、それから12月に7発落とす。これはワシントン州の半報道にあるニュークリアリアクターというのが8機あります。で24時間運転しますと1機で 1キログラムずつできます。だから一月に、5発ぐらいは原爆ができます。だから数字は非常に正しいと思いますが、考えようで、いろいろ考える人によっては違いますが、2発だけでどうしても戦争をやめなさいといった昭和天皇の勇気が非常に良かったと、そういうふうに思っています。
I'd like to add that I visited Potsdam, the site of the Potsdam conference, and I am very much aware of arguments that say, why didn't Japan surrender earlier? And they would have avoided Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I also saw leaflets dropped by B-29s right after Nagasaki urging Japan to surrender. And recently I have read newspaper reports about how the United States planned to continue dropping atomic bombs on Japan, 3 per month in September, October, and November, and 7 in December. Well, according to my calculation, based on knowledge I gained later, I know there were 8 nuclear reactors in a place called Hanford in Washington State. If you operate this for 24 hours, 1 kilogram of fissionable material will be obtained per reactor, which means roughly that 5 atomic bombs could be produced a month. And therefore, I do believe in that kind of figure. At the end, I'd like to add that I respect Emperor Showa's courage for accepting surrender after the usage of the 2 bombs.
I think we have time for just maybe one or two. Jocelyn, you and Peter after that. Okay. And hopefully it's just one question.
Hopefully, yes. Jocelyn Ford, Marketplace Radio. Could you tell us about your meeting with the Emperor after you visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki? When did you meet? What did you say? Did you show pictures? Did you offer an opinion about whether he should stop the war? Did you think that was decisive in the Emperor's mind in stopping the war, apparently? And did you also meet with other military leaders and give them the same explanation? And what were their reactions? Thank you. Is that one?
長崎とですね、広島に落とされた、原爆の後ですね、ご覧になって天皇陛下にご報告なさったそうですけども、その時の、状況ですね、どういうふうなものを使ってご説明になったとかですね、それから天皇陛下の、どういうふうに感じられていたかということと、それからこれが、決定的なですね、その降伏に至るですね、決
定的な天皇陛下のその頭の中でようになったであろうかと、あるいはその天皇陛下以外にもですね、その時の軍人ですねとか政治家たちに同じような説明をなさったんですよ。大体その説明の話。
天皇陛下は滅亡してしまうからやめたかったんです戦争をね。で広島に原子爆弾が落ちてからこのいろいろ説明をするのを事情部官と言いますが、その事情部官に1時間ごとに広島はどうなった広島はどうなったというふうに昭和天皇は聞かれたんですね。そこで、昭和天皇はこれ以上戦争を続けてはいけないと。ただしその時自分に、元帥という階級の人がおりましてですね、3人おりまして、天皇陛下にまだ日本は飛行機も弾薬も人間もいるから戦争を続けてくれと言ったら、昭和天皇はもう決めたんだと、戦争はやめるんだと、そういうふうにおっしゃった。それで、やはりそれでも実は8月15日のお昼に、天皇の放送があったわけです。天皇の肉声のその録音版を取りに行った人間なんかおりましてですね、それは8月15日みんな自決しました。自決しましたけれども、そういうことはずっとありましたけれども、2発でよかったと思いますね。それはもう広島長崎の人には非常に気の毒ですけどね、あれで続けたらとてもじゃないからダメでね、その点については日本の国民は昭和天皇に感謝しなきゃならんと、こういうふうに思う。
先生は昭和天皇にお会いになってないんですか？
なってないんです。私は直接には報告はしておりません。
Okay, I have not reported directly to the emperor himself. What I know, however, is that the emperor was very much worried about Hiroshima after the bomb was dropped, and every hour he asked his chief steward, I don't know the rank exactly, I think it's one of his aides, to report on the condition of Hiroshima. And I firmly believe that the emperor wanted to quit the war because the Japanese race will be wiped out if things like this continue. At the time, there were 3 people who had the rank of roughly Field Marshal Gensi is the top military rank, and all 3 wanted to continue the war. I am very much aware that, however, the emperor wanted to quit. And yes, I'm sure you are aware of that. August on the noontime on August 15th, there was a broadcast by the emperor, and there were some who tried to take away the record and all this. And of course, it is very hard to say this, and I'm very sorry for the people, the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But I do believe that I'm glad that it was only 2 bombs that was dropped and not more, and that is all I have to say.
This is a fascinating subject. I know it's rather unsatisfying because we can't follow up on so many things, but time is short. We have time for one last question. Peter, go ahead. And they do have to get this room ready for another event, so this will have to be the final question. Sorry.
In answer to Peter McGill's question earlier, you spoke about the bombing of Hiroshima as being morally wrong, but Japan had the intention to build and to use nuclear weapons. Is there no moral equivalence there? Weren't you equally guilty, Japan and the United States, of building and wanting to use these weapons? I appreciate what you're saying, that Japan didn't get that far, it didn't manage to do it, but you certainly had the intention. And Saipan as a target, which was mentioned in a target by another of your colleagues, Mr. Yamamoto Yoichi, As a target, it had civilians. I cannot see any moral difference.
先ほどの質問の中でですね、広島を狙ったのは、アメリカがですね、広島に投下したのは、動機的に間違っているんではないか、つまり限定したですね、軍事目標に限るべきであったというふうにお答えになったんですけれども、日本とアメリカはですね、お互いにその原子爆弾を作ることをしていてですね、使う意思があったと、思われるわけですね、両国とも。それだったらですね、日本もアメリカも同じ程度その両親の呵責っていうんですか、同じ程度その有罪っていうんですかね、なんではないだろうかと。それでテニアンとかサイパンのことは先生のご同僚である山本洋一さんが同じようなことを言ってるんですけれども、サイパン島にも民間人がいるわけですね。だから広島と何がそんなに違いがあるのだろうか。
実際、冷戦があって今でも戦争がございます。ただ、私は8月、に広島長崎を両方見ましてですね、とにかく水をくれとかいうそういう非常に悲惨なことを聞きますと、戦争そのものが非常に悪いことだというふうに、思いますけどね。それで、確かにどこにでも、民間人はおります。それから船といっても病院船といって本当は兵器を積んでいく病院船もあります。実際ご覧になればですね、ああいうひどいものをですね、あんまりその時の実感ですが、初めてできたもんですからね、それまでいろいろな毒ガスを使ったり、あるいは砲弾でやったり、あるいは銃殺をしたり、そういうことはありますけれども、ああいう非常に大きなエネルギーでいっぺんにたくさんを殺すという悲惨な状態を見た時の最初の印象というのは、やはりああいうものは人間のいるところでなくって、どっか無人島かどっかでですね、こんな立派な威力のものを持ってるから早く降伏しなさいと、そういうようなふうにしたらいい。でそれに対しましてアメリカの退役軍人は、広島長崎を落としてさえも戦争をやめなかったんじゃないか。無人島なんかに落として日本が何がやめるものかと、そういう考えと、いろいろな考えがありますが、先ほど申しましたスーパーニュークレアウェポンだと、広島長崎の何千倍の力を持っている、そういうものをですね、やたらに人間に使うということは、私は反対したいと思います。
As a matter of answering that question, there was the Cold War, and there are other wars in the world today. I'm very much aware of this. What I speak now is from my first impression after I visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki. During that month, in that year, I saw people trying to get a glass of water. And this is what I felt at the time. It is true what you say about civilians being everywhere. There are hospital ships in the fleet and people on the island, civilian people on the island. But if you had been there in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in that month, in that year, you will feel differently about using it on cities. Up to that point, it was the world's first atomic bomb. Up to that point, we had seen the massacres done by gas and artillery. There were hangings and shootings. But it was the first time that such a powerful weapon, a really powerful weapon, had been used. And if you had been there, you would probably feel the same way. I know there are arguments that say, well, why didn't the United States use it against an uninhabited island as a demonstration, show Japan the might of the atomic bomb. Well, and then there are people in the States, especially U.S. veterans, who say, well, Japan did not immediately surrender after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What use would have been a demonstration against a no man's island? So I do feel that the world today has a lot more so-called super nuclear weapons, which are thousands of times more powerful than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I don't think they should be used against humans.
Do I have time to push for an answer to my question?
What part of the question? The moral equivalent? Yeah, I know.
日本とアメリカがですね、同じぐらい道義的な責任があったんじゃないかについてはどうですか。
私は核兵器をですね、抑止力として持つのはいいと思います。それで、第二次大戦が終わってから確かに戦争はほぼありますけれども、この50年間戦争がなかった。それからキューバ危機がございますね。その1962年のキューバ危機の時もまあ戦争をやりませんでしたですね。そういうふうに持っても使わないと。それであんまり使ったのをですね、使うのが当たり前だとかいうふうに言いますとですね、やはり、とにかく日本は原子爆弾で攻撃された唯一の国ですね。ですから原子爆弾を使うことには一応、日本の人たちは大部分が反対をするんじゃないかと思います。日本もいろいろなこともあったかもしれませんが、原子爆弾ですね、最初は20キロトンと言われてたんです。でよくエナジーを計算したら広島も長崎も12キロトンぐらいですね。そういうので、広島の場合は13万人、長崎の場合いっぺんに7万人ぐらい死んだんですが、その大きなスーパーニュークレアウェポンを使われますと非常にたくさんこれ人間のいないところやればもちろん死なないんですがね、そういうので、やはり、抑止力として持ってる分にはいいかもしれないけど、あれをこれから使ったらそういう使った国は非難される。したがって、それからあった朝鮮戦争とかあるいはベトナム戦争でそういう使用する計画というものがあったかはどうかは知りませんけれども、やはりああいうものはなるべく使わんように、核保有国はこれからも考えておくべきじゃないかと。
As a way to answer your question, I do believe in nuclear weapons as a deterrent, and there were many regional conflicts after the war, but no major ones in the past 50 years. For example, the Cuban Missile Crisis is one. I do not agree with people that say it is a matter of course to use these weapons. Japan, of course, is the only country to have undergone such an attack, and the Japanese are very much against nuclear weapons in general. For your information, it was first said that the Hiroshima weapon was 20 kilotons, but we calculated and found out that it was 12 kilotons. Just 12 kilotons could kill 130,000 in Hiroshima and 70,000 people in Nagasaki. Now the world is, the nuclear powers have many times more weapons which are more powerful, and therefore the countries should be very well. I don't know if they had any plans to use it during the Korean War or Vietnam War, but I do not agree with people who say we should use them because we have them. I know it doesn't answer your question.
That's a Japanese answer. We've heard these answers before.
作ろうと思ったからっていう、作ろう うと思ったってことは使おうと思ったってことなんですよね。で使おうと思ったってことはアメリカとじゃ同じじゃないかっていうそういう
先ほど昭和天皇の話がありましたが、なんかその昭和天皇の取り巻いている人たちはアメリカより先に日本ができたらですね、日本が爆撃されてひぜめに遭ってますね、そういうのは防げるんじゃないかというようなことを言ったし、またそういう基地を攻撃するというのは基地には必ずしも軍人だけでない他の人もおりますからね、そういうただ1945年の7月16日に核実験をやったオッペンハイマーでもですね、実際どんなエネルギーが出るかというのはやってみるまでそう分からなかったんですね。ところがやってみたらすごい、エネルギーが出ますので、ああいうひどいものをですね、人間に対して使うことについてはそうでない方に使うのは、ニュークリア・シビリアン・エクスプロージョンという物品名があります、アメリカのリストの中。これは核爆薬と言いましてですね、例えばパナマ運河もう一つ作りたいというので、あそこをバンバン爆破させて作ると、そういう平和目的で核爆発を使うのはいいかもしれませんけど、やはり人間に対してはですね、元凶を見てる人は誰でも反対するというふうに思います。非常に威力が大きすぎますから、そういうふうに私も思います。
I am of the firm, I am aware that there were people around the emperor who advocated the usage of atomic weapons. They would say if Japan developed it before the United States, we could use it and prevent the firebombings of Japanese cities. And it is true that there are civilians on military bases. But up till July 1945, July 16th, 1945, when Oppenheimer experimented with the actual explosion, they did not know how much energy was going to be released. It turned out to be a very powerful explosion. And I am of the firm opinion that that kind of very severe weapon should not be used against human beings. Of course, there are nuclear explosions devices for peaceful use. For example, when you want to dig a second Panama Canal and all this, maybe that's okay. But I am of the firm belief that they should never be used again.
I think what Dr. Suzuki is saying is if Japan had the bomb, they would have used it more humanely. Any case, thank you very much, sir, for your time, and we'd like to offer you an honorary membership. And please come back and buy Eugene a drink, because he did this for free. Thank you very much, Eugene, also for your drink.
As a side note, there was a related and rather curious story I reported on in 1989. A Japanese gang was arrested for trying to sell 47 bottles of enriched uranium ore with a very high U-235 content, which of course is fissionable material and nuclear weapons grade. According to one of the gang members, the uranium had come from Colonel Kingoro Hashimoto, an ultranationalist tried as a war criminal in 1946. The Japanese media didn't follow up the story in great detail, probably because Japan's atomic bomb program is a bit of a national embarrassment. But I tracked down the likely source of the uranium to a consignment from China, destined for Dr. Bunsaku Arakatsu's atomic bomb program in Kyoto. That was the Navy's atomic bomb program, which was different to the Army's. The total consignment was over 100 kilograms, which would have been enough to yield the 1.3 kilograms of U-235 in the 47 bottles. The Navy's stockpile of around a ton of unrefined uranium ore was seized at the end of the Second World War, but obviously some of it was squirreled away. I couldn't get any further in my investigation. I was being paid by newspapers at the time, and they weren't prepared to finance a deeper investigation. The Japanese Army and Navy burned all the documents related to Japan's atomic bomb program at the end of the war. Everyone involved in it kept quiet until Suzuki spoke out in 1995. The Peace Museum in Hiroshima has a huge display about the US atomic bomb program and the devastating impact it had on the city, but no mention of Japan's own nuclear weapons program. There's no space, I was told by the director of the museum, and one of his conditions for having an on-camera interview was that I didn't ask any questions about Japan's atomic bomb project. Tatsusaburo Suzuki was the last surviving member of that team, and he's now dead. So we may never know.